light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show is my friend David Slater, who is a spiritual counselor and intuitive, and we were tossing around different comments and insights about perception, and the subject came up of time, perceptions of time, and recognizing, I guess, first of all, that we don't all have the same perception of time. In a general sort of way, I read somewhere also that as we age, the perception of time speeds up, so that to a child, summer seems to last forever. And to an adult, middle-aged or elderly even, the years seem to be spinning by so fast. An interesting additional consideration that I ran into in conversation recently, in my idealistic way, I guess, having heard a particular song by a well-known singer, and there was a particular line in there that I was completely misinterpreting. The particular song was Catch Another Butterfly by John Denver. The chorus of the song, as it was written, I discovered afterwards, says, "I wonder if the smell of morning faded, what happened to," etc. And he's referring to all these things as if they were somewhere in the past and didn't make it to the present. The first time I ever heard him sing it on a recording, I didn't have the lyrics in front of me, so I had to go on what I was hearing. And what my perception heard was that he's saying, "I wonder if the smell of morning stayed there." Because all the things he was describing, the childhood experiences and so forth, it was as if, to me, a place in time was a geographical place and not something that was gone, never to return. I wasn't looking at it as sequence, I was looking at it as a topographical map within my memory. And so the notion of returning to a memory from the past as if you were visiting a geographical place. And then, of course, with that sort of nostalgia, wondering, can I go back there anytime I want? Kind of like at the end of the movie Finding Neverland, allegedly the story of the creation of the play Peter Pan. And at the end, this young boy talking with the playwright about the death of his mother, and the playwright expressing, metaphorically and symbolically that, well, she's gone to Neverland, and we can go visit her there anytime we want. The idea, again, that within our minds, time is measured differently, and a place in time may be perceived as synonymous with a geographical place.
And what can occur in a matter of 5 seconds, if you will, inside of our mind or our heart, it can be more expansive than an in-depth conversation with someone going over hours. Time becomes irrelevant when you speak of concepts and ideas, and goes even towards time travel. Gestalt was the one who spoke of going back to the child and loving the child that didn't get loved. And because of doing exactly that, you change your present, because the unloved child is now being loved by the one person who can well love them, the adult of that same child. In doing that, you now change your present, if you will, and go forward, and you also still remember the timeline that happened between the harm to the child and the adult who chose to love that child.
And thereby embracing an act of self-healing.
Yes.
That we need to be healed just as much on on psychological and emotional levels as on physical levels.
Mm-hmm.
The way many people neglect their childhood memories that were so destructive makes about as much sense as limping through life with a broken leg.
Exactly. Choosing to heal, we can transcend what was believed to be a limit of time. The past is not set in stone. The past occurred, and it was our own perception. And we can change our perception of that past to heal our present and our future.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, gee, this would make a really neat idea for a Hollywood movie script.
Indeed.
Because we've already said in this or other conversations, I can't remember at the moment, that it's not that we can change the events of the past, but we can change their influence upon the present. If that were to happen for a collective situation, where in a sense half a dozen or a dozen people were to all do that together, to radically alter their relationships in the present, because together they all fix the past memory in terms of its influence upon their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Idealistically, I could say I hope this happens often within the realm of family counseling. That families coming together, finding ways to be honest with each other, finding ways to reinterpret the events of the past to give them abilities in the present that they would otherwise not have had.
No, it wasn't a possibility before because their perception of the past limited their choices, if you will. I find it interesting the more I work in spirit realm, that where I used to stare off into space and then jump back out of it, and it would be a matter of seconds. I've had times where it felt like seconds, and the clock now reads 2 hours later, and was lost in a delightful thought.
Where did I go?
Exactly, and of course don't remember all of it, but time is a measurement more of distance, or at least as far as when we look at a clock, than it is of anything more tangible. Pardon me, it's not as tangible because we can go any number of places, anywhere we give ourselves the permission to do, and that's truly what meditation is about. And it doesn't matter your belief structure as far as a religion. Meditation is endorsed widely and where do you go in a meditation when you're not limited because it's your meditation?
Well, and to me, it would be about connecting with something greater than yourself, and thereby hopefully empowering yourself. An additional wrinkle, perhaps a new avenue of discussion for this also, in various spiritual circles, you have some religions, some spiritual perspectives that regard time as linear and sequential. And you have other schools of thought, I guess, or ways of thinking about time that regard it as a spiral that kind of repeats itself but kind of doesn't. It's as if the same sorts of lessons are being learned over and over and again, but each time it's a new set of faces and a slightly different form of the same basic dynamic. The rediscovering our own potential has happened various times throughout human history, over and over and over again, where things get built up to a point that is amazing, and then something tragic happens and everything gets thrown back and builds up again, and then something tragic happens and we do it again. Some people would see that as a discouraging, getting stuck in a time loop. I don't know that it needs to be perceived that way, though, because there's something about the repetition that it's like reading a good novel over and over again. Each time you read it, or watching a good movie, each time you watch it, each time you read it, you notice something you didn't notice the previous time around.
A new nuance comes to life.
A
Yes.
new nuance. And of course, you could ask, why a new nuance? And one of the first answers that comes to my mind anyway is that on the next time around, we're not the same people as we were.
Exactly. It's a new person watching it.
It's a new person watching.
Same name.
Same name. You know, if it's the same book, you know the text on the page didn't change.
Uh-huh.
But the fact that you're a new person the next time around, you notice things that had to have been there before. Why didn't you see them?
I've had folks.
Speaking of
Okay.
attention, this is just too funny. If you haven't never heard of it, I read it. I don't remember exactly where this was done, but it was just too funny. And it's like, and the author swore this was a real incident. To test people's perception, they had an audience come in. They had two people on a bare stage, and the audience was told that you are to count how many times one person throws the beach ball to the other. And so, and no, it wasn't two people on stage, it was a movie. They actually made a movie. So it's being played on film, just so they can say we didn't make this up. So they're playing this movie and watching on the screen, and the audience is told how many times did they throw the beach ball back and forth between the two people. In the middle of the movie, someone in a gorilla suit comes into the background, walks down stage, hops between the two as the beach ball is being thrown back and forth, beats on his chest, screams, you know, like pretending to be a gorilla, then turns around and hops back and goes off stage again. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it seems to me it was over half the people in the room, or maybe 3/4, didn't see the gorilla.
Nice.
And so they handed out the questionnaire afterwards, and they were all saying, gorilla, what gorilla? I don't remember any gorilla. So they play the film over again, and they accuse the researchers of playing a different film.
Right.
And they said, no, you can search the room. There is no other film on the premises. This is the film you saw. They didn't see the gorilla because they were so busy counting. That was how selective their perception had become. And you have to wonder if, in our experience of time, frequently our expectations have been so programmed that there's a whole lot of things we're missing.
I've had questions before of folks saying, well, what about this intuitive, or what about that intuitive? And
yeah, which one of you has cornered the market on intuition?
exactly, and who's right, who's wrong, and you know, that type of thing.
Who's the ultimate authority?
What we're experiencing is the infinite. And any one person, no matter what their gift is, no matter what it is they do, is only explaining their little corner of the infinite.
So you're suggesting that humanity is already experiencing both time and timelessness.
Yes. Our perceptions keep going that way. And we so want a progress in
A time-oriented structure.
exactly. And I've had people ask me, well, why am I going through the same lesson over and over and over again? I said, you're not. These are graduate studies. And when we get the concept that we're not progressing because time is involved and everything looks familiar or looks the same.
In that sense, time may become the servant of the growth. You may, in fact, be experiencing the same opportunity over and over again because you didn't get it last time.
Or you,
So in that sense, the universe is giving you another chance.
or it can be not only did you learn it the last time, but now there is a new nuance, just like the movie you were talking about. It looks like the same experience as before, but there's something new to it. You're new and the experience is new. And so whereas, say, you're trying to release judgment and you find yourself judging again, if you look
Yourself
at,
or other people.
exactly, you can say, okay, I'm at the same lesson again. It's like, no, you're not. This is now graduate studies. You are now seeing what an effect it has outside of you, whereas last time it was what's inside of you. My point being is that sometimes we can choose differently by experiencing differently. String theory is another concept along the lines of that spiral that you were speaking of.
Which I'm not enough of a scientist to have an intelligent discussion about string theory. But
well, and not to go in, because I'm the same way. I have friends who
the other thing that pops to mind, though, in what you were just saying,
Uh-huh.
when you say, why am I learning the same lesson?
Mm-hmm.
And you would say, no, you're not. And in some ways yes, in some ways no. One of my questions or objections, I guess, would be, why do you think you got it all last time?
Exactly.
I recall a particular ballet company quite a number of years ago announcing that they weren't going to do the Nutcracker Suite this Christmas because, well, we've done it so many times, there really isn't anything else there. And I was just mortified, and they said, you mean you are no longer a good student? It's not that the work doesn't still have something to teach you.
Exactly.
Maybe you think you've seen it so many times that you know every bit of it. I would still suggest that there are parts of it you're not seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And until you begin with the assumption that there is even more, you won't see any further than you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like saying, why build the Hubble telescope? There's nothing else out there. The bigger telescope we build, the further we see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we will ever build a big enough telescope to see all there is. You know, if that's
Right.
even conceivable.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes back to, in our experience of time, it's not so much about what's there as about how much I'm able to perceive within the amount of time entrusted to me.
And if you start bending the concepts of what you can perceive, then it gets interesting. If we come to a crossroads that may have multiple choices, we can get overwhelmed by the choices, or we can actually sit down and say, oh, okay, I can experience this, 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 or this, and actually, in a sense, build scenarios for each one and learn the lesson from them all, and might even choose an 8th or 9th choice that you didn't even initially find. In a sense,
and to remember that every choice you do make will still include a certain amount of mystery.
oh yes. The thing is potentially you could also learn from 8 different timelines, 9 different timelines, and only experience the one. So where is time
Only
fit in that?
physically experience the one.
Correct.
Emotionally
From this
experience
perception,
all
yes.
of them.
Exactly.
It reminds me of a particular episode of Star Trek Next Generation, in which they come into contact with this peculiar satellite floating through space,
Uh-huh.
and it establishes an energy link with the captain. He allegedly falls unconscious, lays on the deck for 20 minutes, during which time they confirm that there is some kind of energy beam going from this satellite to him, and that his cranial activity, the brain waves, are off the charts. What they learn afterwards is that this satellite is basically downloading about 70 years of life experience into his head in 20 minutes. From his perception, he has suddenly materialized on a strange planet and lives there way into old age. And at the end, the program was created to explain to him what has been happening, that their planet was doomed due to a pending supernova of their sun, that there was no way for life there to survive. The only way they could convey understanding of who they were and that they had existed was to dump it all into this satellite and shoot it into outer space, so they would be out of range of the supernova when it happened. But they didn't have sufficient technology to take themselves off the planet, but at least they could send their memories. You know, but to condense 70 years into 20 minutes was, you know, unbelievable. And of course the Enterprise had never encountered anything like that before.
And the delightful thing is that line that the captain would follow now has a whole new spectrum to draw from, a whole nother lifetime to draw on.
Well, and in a sense, their memory became eternal by being shared.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that we think of, living in a material world, we think of things as measurable and finite. Most things, it seems to me, in spirit or in meaning, are potentially eternal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to the extent that they are shared. We're here for a brief amount of time. I understand that there's a certain constructive need for ownership to create boundaries and civility and so forth. But when we believe that we own things and we try to draw a box around them, too often we wind up drawing a box around their meaning as well. And if we want the thing to be more eternal and less temporal, we have to share it. We have to give it away.
Mm-hmm. And thus the movie, thus the book. I remember coming across a encyclopedia of the Roman Empire, and it was written in 1906, and I got all excited about it, and my friends are like, that's kind of the driest stuff in the world, and I'm like, no, think about it. A Victorian age historian is going to tell me about Caligula. And what
so you'll get insight on two cultures.
Exactly. And
how a Victorian would tell it, as well as what the material had to say to someone at that time.
And it's believed the Victorian era was very straight-laced. When, if you actually look at the Victorian era, it almost had a duality to it. And this book exactly showed that. This Victorian historian, that was fun, actually went into great depth and told me things about Caligula I hadn't known before. And it wasn't straight-laced, and it showed a lot of the decadence, if you will, of Caligula and other emperors. But I could say, I could just flip through the pages and go insane saying this is the driest stuff in the world, when I will allow for myself the opening of all kinds of possibilities of, I'm going to hear about something a century ago, and I'm also going to hear about something millennia ago, and it's all the same story. I'm not confined.
The same story in a general sort of sense.
Yes.
Or no, in a specific sense.
But I open
because
myself
of
up
the
to
various
the experience.
people. Because if you wrote a historical record of Caligula that was written in the Middle Ages, and compared that to the one written in the Victorian era, and then compared that to a modern day documentation of Caligula, the details and the depth, I imagine, would shift radically.
Exactly.
But the other thing this brings up, as we're starting to wind down our discussion here, is our perception of being an individual within a specific place and time, and what our relationship is to individuals in other places and times. You know, to what extent the Victorian author feels like the guy down the street, or to what extent it's like somebody from way back when that is so removed from me, I really don't know what he could say to me. To empathize with Shakespeare's struggles in creating his works, or with Oedipus, the original actors and actresses, or forgive me, actors within Oedipus Rex back in the Greek days, because it's my understanding women were not thespians at that point, that all the roles were performed by men because of other sociological imbalances and stuff, but that's another show. But the notion in perceptions of time, who is my neighbor and who is the complete foreigner, and what is recent and what is ancient. The United States likes to think of itself as a well-established country, I guess. We've only been around 200 years.
Exactly.
If you want to go beyond that, you'll have to go to Native American oral traditions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the historical scholar, so I apologize to anyone I offend, but it seems to me that there are numerous civilizations in Europe that can tell you their history for the last 4,000 years. And that if you go to Asia, they can go way beyond that. Mm-hmm. They know their history. I mean, the 200 years of the United States is a blip on the line in comparison. I mean, it's so brief, it's hardly worth mentioning. You know, if you're comparing the United States to a culture that, or a people that went through different governments but was recognizable as a people for 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the young one now?
Exactly.
Who's the naive little upstart? And who, you know, but the curious thing about that is even in some of these older places of the world where the past is still known, the people living there don't seem to know their own traditions and their own history. You know, in the same way that I grew up in a Catholic church where nobody knew the names of the faces in the stained glass windows.
Mm-hmm.
It's all around us, and it's timeless, even as we make our own limited march through time.
Indeed.
Any final comments as we...
I think time set as a limit is only a limit if we allow it to, just like everything else we come in contact with. Let's allow it to be different than what we've applied to it. So.
And if it is a limit, to make the best use of it possible.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for watching.